Hello, everyone. In this episode, I am joined by Tom Taylor, a first responder in the Pacific Northwest in Northern California. Fires are frequent in Northern California, and among the victims of fires are livestock who are often killed or displaced. Tom Taylor takes care of these livestock while their owners have to deal with more pressing matters regarding life and safety. Tom is connected to the Sheriff's Department of Siskiyou County, where he first got involved in caring for these animals. He's taken care of hundreds of animals over the years and has himself become a fixture of the North State region. Thank you all who like, share, and subscribe. Continue to do so. Let's get started. That's kind of what I wanted to know about is how do you get to the point, where you are, I wouldn't say Dr. Doolittle, but, the man tending the forest, right? Like
Pretty much. So it all started way back when I wanted to join the club and be part of something. I joined the four-wheel off-roader club, which is ATVs, and we use rock crawlers and dirt bikes and so on and so forth. So I went and bought my own four-wheeler, joined the club, and the sheriff's posse was doing one of the gates at the fairgrounds one year, and one of their family members passed away, which there is such a tight-knit community. Mostly family members join these clubs. So they all had to take off, and they wanted to know, who could step in and take over for them while the fair was still going until they got back, which is only 3-4 days. And the Off-Road Rider Club is also part of the sheriff's posse at the time, had members that were, where they joined, had ties to both of them. So the Off-Road Rider Club stepped in while they left. When they came back, I got an application to join the sheriff's posse. And then they said, well, if you want more training, you can join Search and Rescue. So I joined Search and Rescue. Well, they were thinking I was going to leave the posse and join Search and Rescue, which I didn't. I joined along with the sheriff's posse. So I'm doing both the sheriff's posse, the Off-Road Riders Club, Search and Rescue, and all those entailed joining into working with the SWAT team as a volunteer, just cutting down the weed, doing the marijuana eradication, trying to make it safer, which we're falling way behind. I haven't done it for quite a few years now myself, but they're still going. And that accumulated into a couple others leaving, me trying to find something else to do, and then joining the Siskiyou County Ag Department as an animal control volunteer. So we go out and rescue animals that are being mistreated or not being taken care of or fed. People dump horses off in the middle of nowhere thinking the animals are going to get them, and other people find them and say, hey, there's a horse out here that somebody needs to come get. And we go out with a trailer, or unload our horses, ride in, capture them, bring them back, find homes for them. Then the fires start, and I join in and start doing that.
Could you, for our listeners, could you just kind of describe like the difference between the sheriff's posse and then the search and rescue, and what sort of events have been memorable from your experience with those?
So sheriff's posse, we do large animal rescue, which most of us have gooseneck trailers or pull behind trailers. And when there's a fire, we go out and pull groups of animals out in large numbers, keep them from being burned, or try to keep them from being burned. Search and rescue is more of the people side, which we do a lot of rescues up on Mount Shasta, and mushroom growers or pickers. They go out for the morel mushrooms. They get lost, they get turned around, don't have GPS or compass to know, where they started or how to get back. PCT, Pacific Crest Trail hikers that get injured, we go out and rescue them. In fact, we had one just before this fire started. 2-3 days before it started, we went out and rescued a hiker that had a patella tear, which is across the kneecap.
Yeah.
And he'd do really good going uphill. He said it was painful, but he could still manage to go uphill. As soon as he started downhill, he said it felt like somebody was trying to rip his leg off at the hip. So he called for assistance. We got a GPS slant long coordinates. We drove out there and picked him up. and he stayed. It was really, really good scenario as he stayed right where he said he was going to be. And that makes it so much easier for us. Instead of going that one little extra step going, well, I'll help. I'll get to a closer spot where they can find me better. And then all of a sudden we're lost. We got to call the whole crew out to find everybody.
I can imagine how different it is these days, just with phone access, right? Or
right.
Signals. I mean, radio, anything to get a hold of someone on the outside. I've hit a couple sections of the, Pacific Crest Trail, and when I was younger, I said, you know what, I need to do this. It's not that far from Mexico to Washington or to Canada, right? Like, why not?
Notice how I'm laughing.
Well, I thought I looked into it, and the one piece of advice I kept getting was find a way to get lots of clean socks.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, that takes a lot of planning, and even, it's not just the logistics of the movement, right? But you have to have an escape. What are your potential, evac routes? Who do you contact? And what is the rescue going to look like, depending on where you are, and
right.
Have you probably found just as many who haven't survived, right?
I will say that not on the PCT so much, more so people that have just either gotten lost out in the woods or, injured on the mountain. We've had some fatalities on the mountain. We've had to, get out. We've had airplane crashes that I've worked on that were just no fault of the person's own, just trying to push the limit a little bit too far. As far as, okay, we had a breakdown, we're going to just do minimal repair until I can get home, and then I'll fix the rest of it, which that actually ended up being a bad decision. It's the person gets so caught up in what they're doing to try and make a minimal repair to get home that forget a main ingredient like putting fuel in the airplane.
Yeah.
So when they finally realized they were out of fuel because they were using minimum, just the magnetos on and no signaling, no lights, no nothing, and following I-5, and ended up, there you are, ended up realizing they forgot to get fuel, and then had realized they passed an airport a couple miles back, tried to turn and go back to the airport, and were 200, didn't have enough power, enough engine power to get up over the hill. They were 200 feet short of clearing the hill to go back to the airport. And so you go, pull the pieces in is basically what it amounts to. Wait for the Transportation Safety Board to give you clearance. So the whole time you're sitting there waiting, looking at the person, trying to figure out what happened and how it happened. And, when it was, fortunately it was over in an instant. There was no suffering.
Yeah.
But you get on those.
So you're what's a good word for it? I mean, a rescuer. Yeah. First responder is a good professional word, and I think helper or rescuer is kind of, it's on one extreme, and then savior it's a little too much on the other extreme. Right. Like you're I don't know what here is hero the like whether it's animals or whether it's people, you're among those who go out, and take care of those who get in trouble, and
right.
You bring them to safety. So first responder, of course, that's a good term. We'll keep it there. So let's shift a little bit from people, right? And people get lost, people they get into accidents, and you can, well, if you're lucky, the people themselves can contact you. If not, maybe a loved one says, hey, this person, went hiking. We haven't heard from, him in 2 days. We he was in this area, and it's a little tougher to kind of go through the last steps. But with people, there's an information trail that we can follow, that we can, we have easier clues.
Right.
When it comes to animals. Yeah, go ahead.
We hope that there's an information trail. We don't always get that. We've been on 3 that I know of right now that have never been found because we didn't have that next piece of information to continue, and spent 10 to 14 days out looking for a person. And can't use examples, of course, but
right.
There's, it's just a situation where, we have A and B, but we don't have C. And C is that next step that would actually lead us to where that person is. And, there's sort of 3 that I know of right here in this county that have, that have never been found. There were, unusual circumstances. Why, the who, what, why, when, and where, it just never gets answered because
Yeah.
we don't have final clue. I'm basically into all of this just for the closure to, help the family. They either find the lost loved one or person or, relative or neighbor or whoever it is, or, okay, we found them and now we just have to deal with the rest of it. And so
Yeah.
we can finish.
I
And
think that's important.
it is. It is. I mean, your mind does crazy things when you don't have that.
Yeah. And, the people who aren't found are somewhere. And I wonder, and this is maybe where, the two different sides of what you're doing kind of converge, but, do they not just succumb to the environment and then the environment sort of takes care of the remains in its own way? But, what role do animals play in that process? I
Uh,
guess if I can ask it the other way, the more gruesome way, do
yeah,
animals clean up, what the remains? Do they scatter? Like, do they make it more difficult for us to find, the remains of people?
because even animals have to eat,
Yeah.
and can't hold it against them because it's just it's a human being that they've taken over. And we actually had one of those down by Happy Camp, where the person came from back east and they wanted to go to the coast and spend their last days at the coast. They were being heavily medicated from multiple surgeries. He didn't have family to converge with or console with, I guess is another word, to feel better about all of his situation, how bad his situation was. So he decided to drive to the coast. He was going to enjoy a weekend or whatever at the coast. He'd left a note at his house, and they started doing some backtracking. The neighbors hadn't seen him, and somebody else was out hunting. They said, "Hey, we found this car. The door's open. Things are kind of scattered around. We're just a little concerned, if it was stolen or what's going on. We need to investigate it." So then they called the Highway Patrol. Highway Patrol calls the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff's Department calls Search and Rescue, and we get out and start looking. Well, that was actually my very first recovery I was ever on. And I said, well, I've never done this before. So what am I looking for? This is maybe an animal had gotten into the situation or done whatever. And they said, well, look under your left foot. And I'm standing on a rib bone. Like, that's exactly the way you're looking right now is what I did. that was an eye opener.
Yeah.
And we started looking around, and of course, one of the highway patrolmen picks up. He goes, "Why is there's this antenna out here in the middle of nowhere?" And I said, "Actually, that's not an antenna." I said, "I've been around the medical field." I said, "That's a rod that goes in a bone that holds a leg or an arm or something together." And he screamed and dropped it. A man of law enforcement that we look up to. It just turned him into almost an invalid instantly.
Yeah.
And then he posed himself. He goes, "Wow." He goes, "That was an eye opener." He says, "I wasn't expecting that." Well, then there were other things. We found the lower mandible, so we were able to get dental, and that's how we figured out what was going on. But there was other pieces. I found this. It looked like like an old deer hide was down on the trail about 25 yards away. And I said, "I think we need to bag this up and you bring it in for evidence." And they're like, "Well, why would we want to bring a deer hide in for evidence, or bear hide or whatever it is?" And I said, "Well, deer and bear have hair on them and they don't have tattoos. This does." And that's what they did. They all looked and went, "Oh, wow, okay."
Wow.
So, so the world takes care of itself.
Yeah.
There's we're just in it to use it as long as we can, and enjoy the best parts of it. But it will take care of itself.
Yeah, I think, on our end, we're somehow, this generation at least, and more so toward the cities, the suburbs and the cities than in the country life, but we're detached from the permanence of the earth and of the environment, and how our own impermanence, like, it's taken away from us. But like, if you're out in the country, or just in any environment that's not city based, okay, the cities, I mean, look, it's fair for the country too. And maybe this might be an exaggeration, but immediately I'm thinking, when we die, outside of the country, when we die in an urban environment, we have a process for it. We have hospice, we have hospitals. If it's an accident, The first responders are based down the street, and you hear their sirens go, like, and so then that person goes to the coroner, then they go to the funeral home, and then there's a process of, whether it's burial, cremation, however we deal with it at that end. And so there's that end of the process. And it's somewhat artificial in the sense that it's human run. It's organized by humans. And it's easy to forget, I think, that we too are part of this bigger process. We're part of this bigger world. And, dying out in a place that's not controlled by humans, leaves you susceptible to, as you said, the environment will take care of itself. The earth will take care of itself, and it has its own process. Part of those are animals. What are the types of, not to be macabre or anything or gruesome, but who are the main culprits who get into, remains? I'm sorry. I had to ask. It's the only opportunity.
No, that's bears, mountain lions, coyotes. We're not so much in the wolves. They are reintroducing them to this area now up Klamath Falls and around Modoc County, and that they're bringing wolves in and have trackers, monitors on them. Mainly coyotes. I mean, squirrels get into it. You wouldn't think a squirrel that would eat any part of a human in any way, shape, or form, but they'll chew on the bones. It's left over. It's just like a deer horn when the deer shed their horns in the fall or the spring and get ready to grow new horns. Then there's squirrels come in and they eat the marrow out of the center of it. I've got a set of horns in the garage that I could prove that, where they've eaten the center out of nice 4-point and all just hollow right down the middle, where it's taken the whole face of the horn off. And it's a cycle of life that you have to understand and you have to respect without stepping on its toes, I guess is a good way to say it, because it's going to do what it's going to do whether you're there or not.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's, might be a good transition to then talk about, okay, well, you mentioned earlier, people, they'll leave a horse out in the wilderness for that process to happen to the unwanted pet, or I guess we call horses pets, working or not, right? So do you find that a lot of these animals that are abandoned to the woods, they take to the woods? Do they ever become feral? Do they ever, just survive?
It's a cycle of breeding. So we have a gentleman here in the county that likes to rescue horses that are taken to slaughter. So he will go into these kill houses or kill farms or whatever it is, and he'll buy 5 or 10 of these animals. He'll bring them home. He'll turn them loose on his property. Well, they may have been somebody's reining horse or cutting horse or gymkhana, just as an example. And he turns them loose. Anybody could walk up out into his fields and walk up to the horse and pet it and throw a rope over its neck and a saddle on its back and ride away. But he leaves it there with the intent that some of the other stud horses that he's rescued will breed with that horse. And then that colt, male or female, will learn to be on its own. It's because his parents going to teach us how to eat. Colt's going to follow, say, okay, well, this is good. I can eat that. And they continue to grow. Well, now you get into the cycle of you had domesticated horses that have now turned into wild horses because that's the way this guy has designed his property to work. So they can, but it's a cycle. There's a cycle that has to go through in order to get to that point.
I guess it makes sense. I heard a story once about a number of camel that had been released in the Southwest. They were brought there because of their ability to travel through the desert. And so it made sense. But then, the owner no longer, I don't know if he died or what the story was behind that. But eventually, the camels were seen on occasion.
Right.
But they need to breed. They need somehow to, to survive as a species, not just, on their own, for them to take. And I think like in Florida, you're probably familiar with all that going on there with the exotic
with the snake,
reptiles. Yeah,
yeah,
the
with all
pythons. Do we see a lot of that, up in the North Country?
not so much. It's more so of like the one horse that I was part of the rescue. The first group that would always go in and try and rescue it came in on with a stock trailer, and the stock trailer is very loud. They're just loose parts and cows, and they kick the walls and things get loose and so on and so forth. Um, so they go banging up this road. Well, of course, the horse would hear them coming and they'd take off into the woods and run up the hill, and they would never see it. They could see the tracks, but they never saw the horse. So three of us, myself included, one of us, and two others went in, and we rode in on horseback. And we come around the corner, and the horse is standing in the middle of the road, and it just like you could see the shiver that came across it, like like a little kid when they come around the corner and you scare them how they jump and get
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Well, the horse did the same thing. It's out here in the middle of nowhere trying to survive on whatever bushes and you know old apple trees and whatever it can scrounge for to try and stay alive. And all of a sudden, three horses with people on it come walking around the corner. It about turned itself inside out. Didn't know what to do. It just stood there and froze. So one of the gal that was with us, she gets off the horse with a lead rope and walks up and throws it around its neck and puts a halter on it. We ponied it all the way out and saved it. And it actually was estimated to be only about 18 to 20 years old. So it
Oh,
had quite a life left that could have gone through. It was just the people couldn't take care of it anymore. And rather than turn it in, they thought they were going to get in trouble if they just turned it in. And, it's the weird cycle that people think that way, that people would look down on them because they can't take care of their animal anymore, where that doesn't have anything to do with it. If
right.
they would they turn it over to somebody that could take it, would be a lot less painful to them in the long run than to ditch an animal out in the woods, find the animal and find out who it belonged to, because some of them are microchipped,
Oh, wow.
and they microchip and they know where the horse came from, and they can research the history of the buying and selling of the animal through its life. If it is done more than once, multiple times, they can research and find out who it belonged to and who had it last. And then they come back to that person and go, hey, what are you doing? Why'd you do that?
Oh, thanks. You found it.
Yeah, right. We can only wish it happened that easy.
Right. Are pigs a problem up there? I know in
Uh,
Texas, there's a big issue with feral hogs and, the imported boar.
right. No, not so much up here. More down in like Chico and Willows, Corning and Orland, where mom and dad lived for a while. In that area up above Vacaville and more towards the west of I-5, there's quite a few out there,
Well,
but not much up here.
Let's talk about, the animals who need somebody and the dangers of the fires.
Right.
A lot of people who aren't from the area may not, I mean, maybe they see it on the news because the news goes international. And sometimes I remember them contacting us, are you okay? When there's a fire 500 miles away,
Right.
but on the news, it's nearby. And then, a couple years later, I mean, we were almost evac, a couple years later when it started snowing ash, in the Bay Area. And we're one street away uh, from that
Wow.
happening. And yeah, we went up to the roof and we got some footage of fire on the hills and what have you. But you know, people may not understand the way California environment is, especially in the I mean, it's a dry state, and fire happens, right? Like, so,
Right.
what's the problem? What does the problem emerge from? And what other problems does it set in motion? In other words, what do fires do for livestock, for animals, and their owners?
If they're lucky enough to get evacuated out, then the first thing the owners has to deal with is where they have some place to come back to. Depending on how fast the fire moved, I heard word that we lost 135 homes here in this fire with the McKinney fire. 60,300 acres, I believe, or 389 acres total. And it's changed back and forth. They have different ways of measuring it, according to the heat signature, and then others just by landmass, flying over and getting radar that way. animals that don't, the fire moves so fast you can't get animals out, so they flee, and then they get caught in I don't know what you call it, where it's like they go up a canyon, there's like a dead end that they can't get out, and they get caught in that. This fire that was here was very fast moving. It went in one area probably 6 miles in less than 12 minutes.
Wow.
And even the firefighters said that, this was a very, very fast, run for your life kind of fire. So, we had to deal with that. And there were instances where there were good Samaritans or trying to be good Samaritans. They drive up the road and they see, a dead cow in the ditch that got caught in the fire, but yet they see the calf alive on the side of the road. So they decide to save the calf. We're going to pick it up. We're going to take it into somebody. We can go to the fairgrounds and take it to Tom because he'll save the calf. Well, best thing to really do is leave the calf alone and let the owner deal with it, because they have to take account of all their animals. And if they have one missing, well, now they're looking to blame somebody for stealing one of their animals, and which isn't the case. We've got, people that want to help, but it's the same with a wild animal out in the woods. You find a baby deer laying on the ground, you don't pick it up and take it to somebody and you're going to rescue it. Leave it alone. This is the cycle of life that is, there's other animals that may have to depend on whether or not they live that winter by that one animal, or the mother's wandering for it, or she's placed it there on purpose and, hidden it and gone to eat or gone to water or gone to, make sure an area is safe and then come back and get the baby and lead it on to a different area. And now you've disrupted that cycle of life in, good or bad. So that's a lot of what it is.
What sort of animals come to you? And, tell us some of those stories.
I get chickens, I get ducks, I get peacocks, potbelly pigs, goats, horses. We had one horse come in with this fire that he used only for a broodmare. So all she was bred, she would have a baby. I don't remember exactly what the cycle of horse is. I think it's a little over a year or right at a year. And so every year that she was alive, she was about 22 years old. She had a baby other than the first, couple of years, because that's too early for them to breed.
Yeah.
So as a general, 18 years. So she had 18 babies over her lifespan. And that's all she was ever used for. She had a halter on, a lead rope. She was bred. She would have a baby. They would sell the baby, make money off of it, and then breed her again. These people rescued her, and she became attached to a goat, a male goat. And if you touched or you got close to that male goat while it was in the pen with her, she would bite you, she would kick you. But if you walked up and you put the halter on her and the lead rope and led her into a different pen, caught the goat, doctored the goat, because he was constantly under her feet and he got stepped on. So she, I think, broke one of his toes, and it was bleeding. So we had to doctor the goat. Well, you couldn't get to the goat with a horse in the pen.
Yeah.
So in the other pen, she's throwing a fit because you're messing with her baby. As far as in her mind, that's her baby.
Oh, wow.
She hadn't had any babies for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. So she became attached to that goat. And that was a pretty interesting, or peacocks flying out of the pen at, 7:00 at night when you're getting ready to go home. And all of a sudden you're chasing peacocks till 1:30 in the morning because they won't go back in their pen. And, peacock has a brain about the size of a pencil eraser.
Yeah.
Beautiful birds, but they're not very smart. One of the fires I had 67 horses at the fairgrounds.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm, lots of volunteers needing lots of hay, feeding. I had a bull calf that had to be taken care of. Probably no chickens or anything on that. It was, I had potbelly pigs. I had a group of 5 potbelly pigs, and one of them got out and it was scooped underneath all the corrals and the paddocks that we had for the horses. And we chased that thing for hours. And we finally roped it, and you thought we were killing it when we were trying to save it because all it did was squeal.
Any exotic sort of animals, things that maybe aren't living outdoors, or at least in their
potbelly pigs, I would call them exotic. They live in the house or out in the front yard. We had one, her name was Cinnamon, and you could scratch her on the back, walk in. When I first got up to the door, she lunged at me because she didn't know me. Well, then the owner came in. She's like, "Oh no, I'm scratching her. You come in, you scratch her. She'll get your scent." And from that point on, I was her favorite person. She would talk to me and squeal and throw, just get all ecstatic because I'm in there. And it wasn't just the food thing, because I would always go in and I'd scratch her back, and then you scratch her belly and she'd flop over on her side, turn it basically upside down like a dog, scratching her belly. And she just enjoyed it. Couldn't wait for me to come by. About two or three times a day, I go by and scratch her belly, and she just loved it. But that's as far as exotic. That's pretty much it. Nothing. They did take in a turtle this year, with not at my area, but they were with the dogs and the cats. They took in a turtle. They took in a snail. They've taken in fish. People are able to get the fish out of their house before the fire got to them.
Yeah.
So it's it's the pets. Yes, you do have farm animals that need to be taken care of, but there's also a lot of pets. You have your bearded dragon lizards. A lot of people have that. Some people have snakes. Lady across the street from Mom's house has 2 snakes and a frog. It's I can't even remember the name of it. It's one of those big green, really flat. They can stick to glass, and I believe they're from Brazil, but I'm not absolutely 100%. So they were in the evacuation zone. The evacuation zone for the yellow part was half up my driveway from the street, halfway to my house. That's where the zone cut off this year. This fire. Yep, it was actually 3.5 miles. As they say, the crow flies in a straight line, 3.5 miles from the fire to Mom's front door. And the other, like I was saying earlier, that other fire went almost 12 miles in less than 5 minutes. So, Wairika was close. And that's why they had a lot of evacuation to get everybody out of town, just so we didn't end up with a paradise incident like they had there. Get everybody out now. Only a few that are, stubborn and want to stay, thinking their little garden hose is going to fight the fire. It's not. Let the professionals do their job.
Harry Truman's, right?
Yep.
There are places where people do invest in exotic pets, right?
Right.
And they'll have big cats, and I don't mean Tiger King level, but maybe it's a leopard, or something. Or maybe they'll breed different types of cats so that they have, this cat that's part from a domestic line, and then the rest of it has, the spots from a cheetah or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you're leading to, and I can't think of the name of it either.
yeah, I forget what they're called. So, I mean, you guys don't see any of that up there, right? It's kind of, population's too sparse. No one really does that.
A friend of mine had one of those cats, and it actually got out and went back to wild or got hit on the freeway. But it was that was about the only exotic. California's kind of tight on doing stuff like that. You have to get special permit. Like they don't allow the ferrets. We can't have a ferret here in California because it's part of the weasel family, and they breed so fast, and before you know it, they're in killing chickens and ducks and cats, small animals, because I've too. But that's if they get out, if they're taken care of. But California's come up with a rule; they just don't let them in. And if they can keep it that way and keep that under control, then they won't have the other problem. Because out here, there are pine marten and weasels and ermine. Trying to think of a couple of the others. Bobcats, mountain lions. There's a lot of the animals that we have that are wild, would not necessarily brought into a home, but we have a lot of out here. We're not so much urban. Yeah, town is, but outside of town, you start getting to the mountains, and you're there. Just like when we were gold mining. Yeah, running the dredge. There's the whole time we were working, we could have had a mountain lion just sitting there on the top of the hill staring at us.
That's right. Picking us out, right?
Yep. Just figuring which one was the weakest of the group. That was the one that was in the water. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was fun. I mean, what's going on with, don't want to shift gears too much, but we can come back. What's been happening to the gold in that part of the state? A lot of people associate, California gold with Sutter's Fort, the Sierras, and gold that was hitting the gold rush there. But there's different parts of the state that also yielded, great amounts of gold. I think you showed me some walls, that have been built by workers or laborers who have been brought in. Yeah, what's the history of that region and the gold? What's left, I guess.
Right. So I believe back in the day when it was, back in the gold rush, Sutter's Fort and all that, when it was first found, and then they started expanding out, going further north and west, that they started using Chinese labor. And, yes, they would pay them. I don't know necessarily. I don't know the history where they were slave labor. But I know they work for, they might work a whole month and only get 10 to 15 cents or a quarter. What we think now is quarter gets nothing. It barely won't even buy a candy bar nowadays.
Yeah.
For, when they had to live a whole month on a quarter, but back then they probably fed them. It bought them a couple loaves of bread, some salt, some flour, and they went out and killed their own game. So they were able to survive. Yeah. It's, those walls were put up by the Chinese. They would actually get out and move whole stream beds, hundreds of feet in, side to side. They were able to do what was considered hydraulic mining with monitors, high pressure, shooting the water up on the hill, watching the hills down and running it through the sluice box and picking up bigger stuff. Where, nowadays we have the technology of metal detectors and sluice boxes that catch all the flour gold, the stuff that they let go. Where, we get lucky and we find a big pocket of flour gold, 10, 15 ounces, we're rich. Where that stuff, they didn't even see it. They didn't even know it was there. Wow. They only found the stuff that they could visibly see and pick up out of the box. So that was, anything the size of, let's say the end of a positive end of a AAA battery. How small the positive end is that? Well, you can see it. And that's probably as small as they could ever find. Some people use pans and they would get the smaller stuff, but they were usually taught or they're first timers getting taught how to pan for gold, because that's the first thing you want to learn is how to pan for it. Because if you can't pan for it, you can't collect it at the tail end. All you're doing is picking out the big pieces and letting everything else go where otherwise you could find it. Using mercury to collect it, because they didn't know how to get it out of the pan without just using mercury. Because rock and dirt and stuff doesn't stick to mercury, only gold does.
Yeah.
So, and then they burn it off, and then they get poisoned, and it's just we're getting back into the cycle of life again.
What's left up there? I remember going up there and I thinking, okay, well, whatever we bought for lunch and whatever the gas cost to get up there, is probably going to be more expensive than what we're going to take from the mountain, right? And maybe that's one of the reasons why the mountains aren't all knocked down. Just the cost of doing business wouldn't be worth extracting whatever's there.
Right. And that's exactly right, especially with the cost of fuel and everything nowadays. And then even if you do find some gold, let's say you find an ounce and you want to take it to someplace to cash it in. There's not any place here in Wairika that I know of right off the top of my head. So I'm going to drive to Medford. Just the drive to Medford alone in my truck is $80 some to a round trip. Okay. Well, there goes half my gold.
Yeah.
If I'm not making, and if I want to go out to lunch, all right, there goes another quarter of it. So I'm not really making anything. So, you weigh your odds, and whether, that's like you were saying, why the hills and everything aren't completely destroyed and it's all flat, clear to the ocean.
Yeah.
Is the cost is far more expensive to get it than to be, yes, new technology has made it easier with metal detectors and sluice boxes that collect more than, the old long tom that Dad used to make. That's what I learned how to pan with and run through a box, was the old long tom sluice box that Dad showed me how to build, that his grandfather showed him how to build. And it worked. You were able to collect, but there's, so much harder doing that stuff than what they have nowadays. I said, it's a big difference, and time makes all the difference. Technology kicks in, and, you don't have near the effort that was, that they used to have to go through in the old days. The big guy that owned the piece of property and had all the Chinese workers, he just sat by and gave orders and pointed and said, this is where I want you to go, and this is where I want it to move. And, check everybody's pockets at the end of the day, make sure they weren't stealing from him, and start over the next day.
Well, it's fun. Either way, I think it's kind of like fishing, if you can somehow make it to a spot, where you can get a fish. You've probably spent enough in gas to go buy those fish. Otherwise, so even if you're hungry, you can eat your meal, but what's it going to cost you to eat that even if your bait is not live, right? You've invested in bait, you've invested in your rod, and your tackle's just plastic or rubber or whatever.
Right.
You're still probably on the other end of that equation. So you have to almost do it for the sake of doing it, right? Like for the
Right.
outing's sake.
For the pleasure of being away and not having to drive the store, you get to go out in the woods and get it yourself.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, no mountain lions got us.
Yep.
When we were out there, or bears. Did anyone bring like wounded wild animals to the fairgrounds?
No. So the closest I've gotten with the any kind of a wildish type animal was the lava fire, where the fire went up around Mount Shasta, and a weed and Mount Shasta, and then Big Springs in that area. I had one of our guys for the sheriff's posse, being as I haven't worked for them for a few years now, was driving down the road and he saw 3 pigs running down the road. And he said, well, I'm going to rescue the pigs. So he stops ahead of them, gets past them, stops ahead of them, shakes a grain bucket. They jump right in his trailer. He bails out the front safety door while the other person closes the back door. So now we got 3 pigs trapped in the trailer. Well, he brings them to me. We get them into the door. We get them into a stall where the horses, like we do with most of our pigs, because we don't want them out in the sun getting hot and whatever. And I said, I don't know where these pigs came from. They don't look like a domesticated pig. Oh, they were, walking down the road. So I brought them. Well, come to find out, they were wild pigs that had never been around people. They were just hungry and got fire, didn't know where they were. And he enticed them into the trailer with food, and then they were trapped. So then I trapped them in a stall. And every time we tried to go in to change the water or feed them, they tried to attack us. And that's why, because they were wild.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had wild pigs brought to me. That's about the closest I've ever gotten.
I don't want to put you in a compromising position, because I know there's an elite few in the North State who've had real contact, but you want to give us a no comment, that's fine too. When it comes to Sasquatch, number one, have you had any direct contact with Sasquatch? Have you, or do you have a position on this issue in our area in the Pacific Northwest?
Direct contact, no. The closest I've ever come to being any part of it is when Mom and Dad lived up on the hill in Mount Shasta.
Yeah.
The dogs acted up one day, middle of the day, and then we smelled this bad smell. Couldn't distinguish what it was. We've smelled bear before, and there wasn't a bear smell. It was a different smell. Never visually seen anything. And then heard later reports that some of the guys that were up on the mountain in a logging operation had seen something, and we related it to about the same time, the same area, or close to the same area. There was a possibility. I'm not saying there isn't. And with that being said, because I've never seen anything personally myself, and I'm one of the person that somebody says there is something, I want to see it.
Yeah,
and I'll say there's something. So that's what I'm going to say. I'm not saying there isn't. I will say that what I believe is this universe cannot be so small and insignificant that we can't have something that doesn't belong to us. If you want to call it an alien, if you want to call it a Sasquatch, if you want to call it whatever, there's got to be, we can't be the only thing here. We can't be. It's impossible. If our creator was only simple enough to create us, and the animals that are here on this earth, that's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah. And I think, when it comes to, I guess the word is cryptozoology, things like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, there's always been the problem of, well, where's the remains? And, Gigantopithecus in a different part of the world may be suggestive, but it's not like it's in the Pacific Northwest we're finding a bunch of remains.
Right.
And I think that's always been a trouble. And I forget where I heard this. It may have been on a 80s documentary, or 90s probably, because they start getting more interesting in the 90s. Mm-hmm. But there's a certain numerical threshold. I think that they're like, if Bigfoot is here, then there has to be more than this amount for us to see, to have visual encounter. And there has to be So if it's above that range, we would be seeing more. So it's got to be fewer than maybe 200 or something like that. If it was lower than that, it may not be able to breed, like you were saying at the beginning, for feral animals or for animals to become wild. They have to have a mating population and they have to have access. One thing that gets lost in the conversation around Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and you hit it perfectly on the head, is we may be filling in the blanks with our own thoughts or with people's descriptions of things. And then there's hoaxers that go out there and they try and make a hoax of something. But the reality is, what bear smells like.
Right.
That certain things can elicit the same response, in the dogs, that a bear could.
Right.
And you encountered something that is awkward, it's odd, it's irregular, it doesn't fit within any of the things we know, and it matches with other encounters that the loggers or other people have in certain times. And so this is especially important for me, as a researcher, because a lot of what I do intersects with mythology, right? And how people remember what they experience and what they encounter. And sometimes they explain it in a way that it takes on its own story, its own mythology. And then they do things based on the story, not on the actual encounter. And so something odd happened, and something odd, generated an event. And those oddities happen in a specific region. Yeah, there's copycats in Colorado and Maine and Florida. Come on, Bigfoot in Florida, forget about it. This is mostly centered in, and sorry for those of you who, I don't know, call them chupacabra or whatever is over there. But in the Pacific Northwest, we do have a tradition that, is attested by Native Americans and the European settlers, right? And so Sasquatch or Bigfoot, call it whatever you want. Maybe a large part of that is the mythological element, and that we're filling in the blanks. The other end, though, is, well, people are in this part of the world, in the Pacific Northwest, certain things happen. Those certain things happening, being unique to that region, or at least unique enough until the news is on other places and people can, hoax it somewhere else. It aligns with, experience, and maybe some of that is visual. Like these days, everyone's got a camera on them, right? You got a telephone, you got a camera, pretty much. You've got a video camera, and there's opportunity to, we have we have trail cams too. We've got hunting cam. We got like all sorts of things to put out in the wilderness, to help us along the way. So we have the tools to maybe narrow that down. And I think, our contribution to this conversation is there are real things that happen in the Pacific Northwest, and there's stuff we don't know. Right. And that's real. And take it or leave it, maybe someone aligns it with something they thought they saw. Maybe someone at a different point confused a bear. Like it was maybe I don't know, what do you call them? A mutant bear of some type. I'm grasping at straws, but the point is, I want people to take away, things happen, and those things are real things. And, our lead on that, we'll call it Bigfoot. We'll call it Sasquatch.
Right. Because everything is not a cut and dried explanation. You go to the store, you look at a dozen eggs. Okay, well, where those eggs came from. That's a cut and dried explanation. Right?
Yeah.
You also have to be careful of, back in kindergarten, when we all went to school, or those of us that did, played the telephone game, where you whisper something to the little kid's ear next to you, and then it went around, and by the time it came back to you, it was absolutely nothing to do with anything you said. And you've got to be careful of that too, because that happens in a lot of the situations, like you were explaining earlier. The mythology of it. One story is told that it was exactly what they saw, and told that to the next person. Well, then the next person embellished their little part on it, maybe, hey, I was with this person when they saw this, so I know it for a true fact, that it was 6 feet high or 9 feet high and, had hands and feet the size of an elephant. And then the next person, he tells it, goes, yeah, I was with them when they found it, and it snowballs from there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you got to be careful of that too. We're also saying before, we have all this technology, all these cell phones, and all the years have gone by. Where are the bones?
Yeah.
Have they are they smart enough to bury them and cover them or put them in a place where they'll never be found? Is there some cave somewhere that we don't know about or underground lava tube? We're going to tear the whole world trying to find out what it is. Why don't we just enjoy what's there?
That's it. I'm glad you brought up the lava tubes because the for listeners who aren't from this region, the Pacific Northwest is part of the Ring of Fire, and there's a lot of volcanoes, that wrap around this part of the Pacific and the United States in particular. I mean, you go down Mexico, there's volcanoes all around Mexico and Central America, and then they kind of reemerge in Northern California and they go up to Alaska, right? Everyone knows about Mount St. Helens erupting and things like that, but Mount Lassen, Mount Shasta, and Crater Lake was a volcano too up in Oregon, right?
Yep, Crater Lake.
So there's just a bunch of like volcanoes, both dormant and extinct, that leave things like lava tubes. What's a lava tube?
So a lava tube is created when the hot lava is flowing out of the volcano and a gas bubble forms. Let's say it hit a glacier. Well, when it hits the glacier, the melting ice creates steam. The steam blows through and goes under very high pressure, but at the same time has a cooling property that will cool a tunnel. It's basically what it is a tunnel. I've been in some that looked like it had a flat floor and looked like it, and straight sides and a domed roof for 300-400 feet. It looked like a Greyhound bus just drove through this pile of concrete.
Wow.
Stopped right at the end. It was just a square end, like you could reach out and touch the headlights and the grill and everything, but that wasn't there. It was just the way the gas formed. I've been in some. Well, have you ever been in Pluto Caves? Did you ever get to go?
No,
through
I didn't
Pluto?
get up there.
Okay, well, right now, if I was to take you there, you would be very disappointed by my explanation of the way it is now compared to the way it was when I was growing up, 10, 12, 13 years old, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Explorer Scouts. That was one of our versions that we would always practice at least once a year, is to teach people about lava tubes, and Pluto Caves was a good one. Back in those days, there was no graffiti. There was no campfire stuff and all that. Now there's graffiti that's 200-300 feet long, where kids have gone in and I guess you call it tagging,
Yeah.
where they go tag the walls and put their little signature and all that. You can't ever fix that. You can't go in and sandblast it off the wall, because now you have a sandblasted wall that's as much destroying it as they did when they painted it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I think the total is 5 or 6 miles. I think it goes underground, or possibly 12. I don't have the numbers with me right now of how far it goes back underground and how deep, but it's 200 or 300 feet deep off the surface and miles backwards, back in there. And I've been all the way to the end, and I've actually dug sand out of the very end of it and tried to get into another chamber. And I'm not claustrophobic, and I just got tired of digging. I didn't want to go any further. I've had fun with taking girls on dates, and we go back in there and come out with just using the flint off of a cigarette lighter for a light. And
oh man,
almost falling in deep holes coming out of there. I've had a lot of fun in those caves, but nowadays it's nowhere near like it was when we were young and growing up. But yeah, that's the way it's formed. Is just gas is formed when it hits ice or glacier. There's a lot of glaciers up on Mount. Actually, we're almost out of glaciers right now because it's been so hot lately. They've almost all melted off Mount Shasta, and that's been the first time that's ever happened in many, many years, where we're almost out.
Yeah, I was up there a few years ago, and it was bald.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen any visible snow on the mountain, and you go up there to see the the mountain's contours, and
Right.
part of that is certain areas are going to persist with snowpack, and
Right.
It didn't that year.
Yeah.
So,
And did you get around to the north side to see the glaciers over there, Whitney Glacier and those?
no, we stuck around the west side
Yeah.
most of the time we were there.
Yeah.
But
So the north and northeast side is the one that has the bigger glaciers that usually persist year round.
okay, yeah.
they're there. So, and they're getting pretty thin. If people have noticed that, there's not much left. Mud Creek's flowing on a daily basis. Usually in the morning, you can drive up Pilgrim Creek Road, and Mud Creek is, flown over the road in the middle of the night, and you'll drive up and it's all dry.
Yeah.
And back in late afternoon, and you'll see water starting to run, and that's about the time you need to get out of there, because you get flash floods that go through there from the glaciers melting off the. So it'd be the southeast corner, Mud Creek, in that area.
Yeah, I mean, there's miles and miles of subterranean, whether it's the caverns, in the area, or the lava tubes. I mean, there's a lot that we don't see. They could hold secrets that we don't know about.
Yep. Yeah. Or they could be holding things that we're actually looking at and just don't understand.
Yeah.
You could be looking right at something or holding it in your hand and not know what all that means that you got in your hand, where it came from, or who made it, or or did somebody make it? Was it left from long before whoever?
Do you ever find people or wildlife having gotten trapped in there? Or
wildlife, yes, on some. In fact, the one that was the one looks like a greyhound drove through it, is out in the McLeod area. And you'll get snakes, and every once in a while you'll get a deer that'll fall through the entrance, because you have to use a ladder to get down into it. And there'll be something that'll run by and it'll get dropped down in there, and you'll either find bones or you'll find something that's barely alive.
Yeah.
If it's barely alive, you pick it up, throw it out of the hole, and continue on.
How can our listeners help in caring for these animals who get rescued from fires? I mean, it's not a one-time thing, right? Like, this is a regular occurrence. Tell us about the operation and like what it's like, what the needs are for the operation, and how people can help.
The best thing to do is just pay attention to the news. Listen to where these fires are. I actually did have a lady call from Santa Rosa that offered property, which Santa Rosa for us is about a 6-7 hour drive from where we are here in Wairika. She offered 15 acres. Hey, if anybody needs help, needs a place to put an animal, I got green grass, bring them down. Okay, well, that's great, but we're not going to drive 7 hours to go take, a couple horses or, a donkey or potbelly pigs down to somebody's property. It was just too much. We need local close. So I would suggest that people are watching the news, pay attention to where these fires are, get a hold of your Chamber of Commerce or your Office of Emergency Services, and offer assistance, as in, okay, I will donate food. What animals do you have? Or I have clothing for people, or however, I have tools, what kind of tools are needed? I'm willing to go buy some tools. What do they need? Like, for instance, we use manure forks for cleaning the paddocks that are outside and cleaning the stalls in the barn. Or we use water hoses and water, the nozzles to spray out the floor, I kind of take that on my own as being respectful on my part to the person that has offered the building to us, which was the CEO, Cliff Munson. He says, here it is. If you guys need it, whenever you need it, it's here for you. So I kind of take it upon myself to leave it at least as good as the way I found it, if not better, because that makes it that much better the next time something happens. He's more than willing. Jump in. Here it is. He's basically given us the whole rodeo grounds outside of the normal fairgrounds perspective, I'll say, because we have two areas that we do rodeo. One is where the racetrack is, and one that's called Lillard Arena for the Ron Lillard that passed away here years ago. He was a rodeo announcer all over the States. They dedicated that area to him, and now it's been turned over to us for use in fire. So I have the whole arena out front that I can put cows in. I can put a small group of cows in one spot. I have enough room for 67 horses. I have the water. I have wash racks. I have full access to fire hoses and regular water hoses with spray nozzles. And I have access to all three barns. And I think there's 12 stalls on each side of each barn. So I have 12 times 6. It's a lot.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And, whatever I need. And then this year we had Tractor Supply come in and brought a bunch of donations for bag feed for the animals and hay. And we had Grange Co-op come in with bag feed and hay. and feed buckets and 5-gallon buckets and blow up swimming pools and kiddie pools. Like for the ducks, they can get in and take a bath. We usually take all of our swimming pools and cut down one side of it so the chickens can get water and the ducks can get in without having to jump up over the edge of the pool.
Okay.
Because they can get out fine, but they have a hard time getting in. So we usually take about a foot and a half, 2 foot out of the side down about half the depth of the pool. And we put that on the high side of the floor, which not all floors are perfectly level. So we find the high side and fill it with water. And then now we don't have to have changing water buckets for the duck or the chickens every day. If we have chickens, the ducks have a place to swim and get their water. We throw feed in and they can feed just like they would if they're in a pond. It's and the potbelly pigs, we throw grass hay on the floor or shavings. If we didn't have it available this year because the fair was going to happen. They had put everything in the barns, and then it got switched to Medford. Jackson County Expo opened it up for our Wairika folks for the 4-H and FFA to take their animals up and show them and sell them up in Medford because of the fire. Cal Fire had completely come in and taken over the whole fairgrounds, every square inch of it, and other places in town. Forest Service had the high school and over in the town of Montague. So we had 2 different areas of operations over there. We had all of Cal Fire in the fairgrounds. So it's just paying attention to the news. Getting back to what you asked before, just pay attention to the news. Get a hold of OES, Office of Emergency Services, and find out what you can do or where you can do. We have dogs, we have cats, sometimes exotic animals like lizards and birds and snails and turtles. My farm animals range, from chickens, peacocks, potbelly pigs, goats, horses, cows. A lot of the area up here, when the cows are taken to other ranches where they can be with other cows and not just left out in the middle of our field or our arena with nothing to graze on, because cows need to graze. So they're usually taken to another field. It's just pay attention to what's going on and then getting a hold of the right people.
How do we get a hold of the right people? I mean, is the Office of Emergency Services a state organization or is it county based?
I believe it's state. I'm not positive. I believe it's state, and then they will direct you to the county seat in some way, shape, or form of who's in charge of what. Like I volunteer with the Animal Control Office, which is the Siskiyou County Agricultural Department.
Yeah,
is a leg of that. We have 3 sworn officers that go out and take care of animals. I volunteer. If they need an extra hand, they give me a call. I'll go out with my truck or my trailer and help haul, or I haul their trailer. Fire hits, a snowball.
everything at once.
Yeah.
And, all the needs happen. Do you know anything about CERT, the Community Emergency Response Teams?
That's usually for urban areas.
Okay.
We don't have too much CERT going on in Wairika or Siskiyou County.
Yeah,
that's
naturally.
More like Redding, the bigger cities, Redding, Medford, where we have teams. They have teams. I've been trained in it with search and rescue, but
Okay.
That's more of a door to door. Searching under beds, searching in closets, searching elevators is more of the CERT type exercises that they do. I've been trained with search and rescue for 9 years now, and I do CORSAR, which is California, Oregon Regional Search and Rescue, where we join teams. Siskiyou County and any county that's touching it outside, we usually get together and train together. If Jackson County needs us, which is the furthest next one to the north, then they call when they've exhausted a lot of their people and been going for about a week. Then they call us to call a CORSAR, and then we go up and help them, and then surrounding counties above them come down and we all work together. We all train together. Half the time we all know each other's name on a first name basis. It's, we're that tight knit of a community with search and rescue. I have been asked to do work with the animal control as a volunteer when they had the Paradise Fire and they were trying to get animals out. They needed volunteers to go help at that shelter where they were taking them. And I was just getting ready to load up in the truck, and they ended up having 4 or 5 volunteers come in. So we didn't have to leave Wairika and go down to them, because once we're down there, we're committed. We don't leave until it's done and over and everybody goes home. Yeah, I had animals here 17 days. And the last 3 days, I only had 1 group of chickens. There were 44 chickens and 2 ducks. And the owners were just trying to get back into because the closure was a mile away from their house. So they're waiting for the move house to before they could get in. days where everybody else was able to go home and the animals were able to return home. But quite losses as far as cows getting trapped because the fire was moving so quick. It pushed them into areas where they couldn't get away. That was the main loss this year was cattle that they had down in that area.
Yeah, it makes you wonder sometimes, how natural the fires are and how unnatural they are in the area.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. You've got a fire, you're going to have a fire. How much could we do to prevent that? That's only time will tell. We've somehow backed out of taking care of the forest the way we used to.
Right.
And I don't, because of, populations, just trying to keep people out, to preserve the natural state of what's out there. Well, there's also the effect you have of, okay, we want it to be natural. We want to go out there and see what it's like natural.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. But then you also need to take care of that natural state, because if you don't, then you end up with these fires. This fire was over 60,000 acres.
Yeah. I mean, just going back to how you describe all the different needs that you guys have, it's really so multifaceted that you kind of don't know what to prepare for sometimes. And if, is there a way that a rancher could have created a space in the property that would have kept, that the cows would have ran to, where they could have at least survived, or half of them would have survived? These are things you don't forecast because their life is simple, right? They eat, sleep,
Yep.
The other one.
Like where I'm at the fairgrounds, when I go to work there, yes, we have minimal amount of grass. And if we do have grass, it's kept, green and under control. Minimal about buildings. Now my barns that they loan me or that I get to use, they're wood, but I don't have anything close enough that would more than likely catch those barns on fire.
Yeah.
So that's why they considered that a safe area for me to be at. And, everything comes to me, because if you go to somebody else's house, let's say you're, 5 miles up the road from where this fire starts, and 15 minutes later, that place burns down, then where do you go?
Right.
Yeah. You can't just keep leapfrogging. So you want to get out as far away as you can, but not so far that you can't still be in somewhat control of your own animals. And that's what I've always tried to impress on people when they bring them to me. You don't have to worry about that when they get to me. Just deal with all your rest of your situation that you're in now. Whether you have a house to go to, whether you have clothes, putting fuel in the truck, driving back and forth to check on other animals that you weren't able to get out, that, they're still taken care of. You can't just leave them there until, 3 weeks down the road. They still have to eat and drink.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, if you can reduce the stress load, and by reducing the amount of responsibility that people who, are going to just try and survive, fight for their lives, have to focus on. I think that's key. And one of the main benefits of the service, that you do, are there any skills that are desirable for volunteers to have, and for not just fire response, but like really the community or the communal aspect of mobilizing, whether it's animals or otherwise?
I would say at least somewhat of a driving skill. So you need to know how to operate let's say a truck. So if you're wanting to help and you're going to haul a trailer that's going to have animals in it, you need to be able to know about that trailer. You don't have to know it like it was your own, but you know what to look for. That it's not. I've had trailers come in that they've set in a field for the last 15 years. So the bearings were dry, the floors were rotted, and they're trying to haul animals with it.
Yeah.
Well, it comes to me and I look at it and I say, okay, well, where'd you get this? Well, it's been in the field 15 years. Well, then I start going through and inspecting, and I find a floor that's bad. A horse is not going to stand on a floor that's bad. Not because they don't want to. They'll get in there, but then their foot will fall through and it'll drag on the pavement, and you'll have a 3-legged horse. Okay. There's only one outcome for a 3-legged horse.
Right. Yeah.
So, these are things that have to be looked at, and not to be sarcastic, but common sense is a big key factor.
Yeah.
You got to look at the situation as, okay, what would it be like if this was me? if I was in the back of this trailer, am I going to be safe? That's the way I take it. And, so I start checking, get my pocket knife out. I start checking floors. I pull up mats. I don't really care that your wiring doesn't work, unless you have electric brakes. I'd like to know that your brakes worked, but the lights don't have to work. You're hauling your animal home. Deal with that problem later, or you're needing to get an animal out. Deal with that problem later. We don't, we want to save the animal or, do whatever we can, or the people. You might have no animals and have 15 people in the back of that trailer.
Yeah, sure. Right. I mean, given the speed that some of these fires, come at us with, it's you have to use all your tools at your disposal. I guess the lesson is maintenance, and keep everything in working order and
Right.
practice the skills you have. Right.
Right. So if you have horses on your property, the main key, which a lot of people do, I reiterate every time I talk to somebody, teach that horse how to load, teach how to get in the trailer under whatever situation. Nice and calm, and it's a great sunny day, and the horse, you throw a little food in there, and the horse goes in the trailer. You pat it, you brush it down. Okay, this is a really safe place to be. Okay, the next time you want to train it, basically the same thing, but then what we call sacking out. So you make noises, plastic bags, ropes, banging on the side of the trailer with hammers, to desensitize that animal that no matter what situation you're in, that you have to go in a hurry. You're all excited. The horse is all excited. It doesn't want to load. Okay, well, now you've basically just lost a horse because it hasn't been trained to properly load in a trailer. A lot of horses don't like 2-horse trailers. They want to be in a stock trailer, or that's the only thing they've ever been in, and they feel safe. Try and get a 2-horse trailer and teach them that, because that might be all you have to save the animal's life. Birds are a little different. You can catch them, throw them in the cage, and bring them to whatever.
Yeah.
Potbelly pigs are a little hard to load because they don't want to jump up in the back of a trailer, or they don't want to get in the back of a car if they're small enough. You're going to have to pick them up. Well, they might fight you. They might turn their head and bite you. They might scratch you. Who knows? So it's just training. Pay attention to what you have and taking care of it. Teach them what emergency situation. It doesn't have to be an emergency, but teach them what it's like. So at least they're somewhat prepared and they don't panic, because panic causes injury.
That's right. Yeah. And there's some degree of will too with the animals. I mean, they're going to make their own decisions. And you can control them as much as you can, but if they want to bolt, they're going to bolt, and that's going to be on the owner. So that's great advice.
The old saying is, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Amen.
That's about what it amounts to.
Beautiful. Well, Tom, it was a fantastic conversation. Thank you for joining me. And, to all the listeners out there, donate to the cause if you can, whether it's funding, or if you're in the area and you have feed, you got hay, you got any of the tools that are necessary to, keeping these animals safe and secure, so that they're, the people who have to worry about themselves and their families can just do that. Please, by all means, jump in on that.
Yep. Just, get a hold of any of your local services that take care of emergency services. Call the fire department, or call the police station and say, hey, who's in charge of whatever. I want to help take care of dogs, or I want to help take care of cats. We can always use a volunteer to come down and, help feed. I ended up, this fire had 198 animals, which were mostly chickens and ducks, 3 peacocks, potbelly pigs, horses, mini horse, and we have other issues. We got animal comes in sick. We're taking care of a sick animal while we're trying to take care of all the rest also. So, just coming down and spending a few hours, at the right time. There's, like, I feed at 7 in the morning and again at 5 in the afternoon, twice a day, and, check the water during the day. There's other people that would be nice to have do that, but you don't want to show up in the middle of the afternoon in between everything when all the work's done and say, I'm here to volunteer. Get here early in the morning, wake up and get that 6 o'clock cup of coffee, and, show up to start grabbing some feed, or throw some hay, or, rake out a stall, or, whatever. It's, all that makes a difference to wherever you're at. It doesn't matter if you're here in Wairika or you're clear across over in Maine. If they need help doing it, get there at the time where they can actually use you. And that makes a big difference also. Get your baseball teams together. It's good effort. Football teams.
Yeah.
We use we use a football team at the fair just to collect garbage, and it's a good workout for the kids, and they get to ride around on the tractor and wave at all the girls, so it's a lot of fun.
There you go. Well, yeah,
Yep.
it sounds like, having an emergency response plan is a good thing for, livestock owners to have. And
Yep.
anyone in the area, if you're in an area that is threatened by fire, you need to be conscious of a plan, have a plan, and be ready to execute if necessary, because it's not out of the ordinary for fire to exist
Right.
in the region. Did you have anything to say about fire breaks in the
Yeah.
area?
There's a lot of fire breaks around Wairika in this area now because of this fire. So the way they do it is with either a D8 or D9, D6s, caterpillars with blades on them. The blades are 12 feet wide. The rumor is, and I've personally seen the results firsthand, but without seeing the blades and the cats on working myself. But I've seen what's left over. The rumor is they were anything from 6 blades wide, which is 72 feet, to 14 blade wide, which is almost the length of a football field.
Wow.
Is how wide of a fire break we have on a lot of these trails that they've done. Worst case scenario is now that these motorcycle riders and kids and 4-wheel drive trucks and want to go out and play, they're thinking that these are all opened up and they can just go and play on these fire breaks. That would be okay if it wasn't on private property. So you want to make sure where the area you're going to play on isn't on somebody else's property that's protected, because that kind of makes the landowner a little upset that now they're being taken advantage of, that these kids are going out playing, or adults. It's not just kids, it's anybody going out on these new fire breaks that have opened up a lot of this ground that makes it more accessible to go climb a ridge, or go to the top of a mountain, or go look at get high enough to go out and look and see if you can see the ocean from some hilltop somewhere, which apparently you can see from the top of Mount Shasta. I've never been there, but apparently you can see the ocean.
I'm sure with how far south I've seen, just from where I've been on Mount Shasta, I know, you look the other direction. As long as it's clear, as long as it's clear, you should be able to see. Well, Tom, thank you again for joining me. And, it was a great talk, and, best of luck to you.
Yep. Yeah. We just, like the old saying, we can just keep our finger in the fire. We keep going. I've got so many things in the areas that I do and I volunteer with. Is the animals is the most fun.
Amen. All right. See you later, folks.